Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Alex Pavlak and I am a systems engineer at Fortinet. And today I am joined by my colleague, Marcellus. Marcellus, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. I am Marcellus Smith. I'm also a systems engineer here with Fortinet.
Thanks, Marcellus. So today's video, we are going to be covering configuring an IPsec tunnel between a FortiGate firewall and a MX Meraki firewall. We do run into this a lot with our customers. Sometimes they are switching over from Meraki to FortiGates, and that's going to be like a slow transition. So as they're doing that transition, they'll need to build temporary tunnels until they can switch out all of the FortiGates. Sometimes they are just running in hybrid firewalls where they're running multiple vendors. So we do see that a little bit too. So we do have a lot of customers that are interested in VPN configurations and setups between Meraki MX firewalls and Fortinet FortiGates. So we figured this would be a very useful video for everybody. This will be a step-by-step guide on how to configure an IKEv1 IPSec tunnel between a FortiGate and an MX device. So with that, I am going to pass this over to Marcellus, who will take us through the Meraki dashboard and the necessary configurations that we'll make on the Meraki dashboard. So go ahead, Marcellus.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. So now we're looking at the Cisco Meraki dashboard. Specifically, we're looking to create a site-to-site VPN. So the first thing we'll want to do is make sure that this is, we go ahead and click Hub. And we do want to make sure we have at least one subnet that is enabled to advertise traffic over that tunnel, which we do. Now, we're going to go ahead and add Alex Pavlak. We're going to use his name as the name of the tunnel as well. We're also going to select IKE version 1. And then for IPSec policies, we have for phase 1. Now, this is not for the default. We went ahead and stepped it up rather than the 3DES, which is going to be for default. We wanted it to be a little more secure. So we did choose AES 256. As well as SHA-256 for our authentication away from the SHA-1 default. Diffie-Hellman group, we also moved away from the 2 group, moving it to a more secure option for 14. We'll leave lifetime seconds the same at 28,800. And then for our phase 2, we've turned off PFS group. We have our lifetime at 28,800 seconds as is the default, and we've also left our default authentication and encryption options available. Once we've done that, we want to make sure we put the correct public IP name as well as a remote ID, including private subnets that we are expecting to be available over this VPN peer. We made sure the pre-shared secret is also the same. And then for availability, you can select either all networks, or if there's a specific network that you want to be able to make use of this tunnel, you can select that as well. Once we've configured these, we can go ahead and save those changes. Awesome. And then from the Meraki side, we should be pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it back to Alex so we can look at the FortiGate side.
If you could just scroll, share your screen back and then just scroll down a little to the tunnel config.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just a couple of things here that I did want to note. The remote ID that started to be checked in MX firmware version 15 and higher. So the remote ID has to do with NAT traversal. So in our instance right now, my FortiGate is behind a NAT device, and Marcellus's MX is also behind a NAT device. When the IPsec phase 1 negotiation is happening and they are going through NAT-T, they are going to be checking for remote IDs. So they exchange hash values, and those hash values need to match. So the actual public IP address from my FortiGate will be different than the actual hash value of my local IP address on my FortiGate, because it's going through that NAT device. So essentially what we're doing there is we're telling what hash value should be sent over when it's going through the NAT-T process. So that is what the remote ID is really doing there. So that ID should be the local IP address of the FortiGate if you're going through a NAT device. In addition to that, the private subnet, that's going to be my local subnet that I'm going to advertise over to Marcellus's MX. And then just the availability section of that, it's set to all networks. So if you had multiple MXs in that environment, all of those MX devices will try to reach out and form this tunnel. If you wanted only one of your MXs to form this tunnel rather than all of your MXs, then you would just change that availability there. I think that is going to do it for the Meraki side of the configs now. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and go through the configurations on the FortiGate side. So from here, we're going to go down to VPN, and we are going to use the IPsec wizard. Before this video, we did test this out to see if the pre-configured Cisco will work here, the template for Cisco. This did not work. There were a lot of default configurations in here that were just not compatible. So we did figure that this Cisco option is only available for ASAs. This is not going to be compatible with Meraki MX devices. So in this instance, we need to use the custom value here. So go ahead and give it a name. I'm just going to name this gate to MX. Click next. And now this is where we need to enter in all of our phase 1, phase 2 configurations. So we are going to be doing it by static IP address. There are a couple different options here. For simplicity, we're going to be using static IP. So go ahead and you would enter in the remote peer public IP address. So this is the Meraki's public IP address. So the interface that we're going to be reaching out from is going to be the WAN 1 interface. All of these other options, I believe we need to disable dead peer detection. Let me just double check that really quickly. Yes, so we did get this working before. We needed to change around a couple of these configurations. The tunnel did not come up with dead peer detection on, so we disabled this. And that is the only thing we need to change on this side. We are doing authentication through pre-shared key. So go ahead and just enter in the password there, which is easy here. It's Fortinet123. For this video, we're going to be doing IKEv version 1 and main mode. The Meraki MX devices do not support aggressive mode for IPsec tunnel, so we are doing main mode. Main mode is more secure as well, so for those purposes, we're doing main mode. And then the phase 1 proposal will just need to match up what we configured on the MX side, which was AES 256 and SHA 256, and our Diffie-Hellman group was 14. The key lifetime is 2800, and our local ID, we are going to just set that as our local IP address. So the IP address that's configured on your WAN interface, or whatever interface is going to be reaching out and trying to form that tunnel. Going down to phase 2, we need to configure our subnets that we're going to be advertising to the MX, and which subnets are going to be advertised to the FortiGate. So our local address is going to be 2.168.91.0/24. And our remote range, subnet is 192.168.5.0/24. It is really important to make sure that those match up. If these don't match up, you can have some phase 2 errors come up. One thing to note too on the Meraki side, if you have multiple subnets that are configured on the VPN page, so you can see right now we only have one enabled. If we do have multiple subnets enabled, the MX will advertise all of whatever subnets are enabled. They will just advertise all of these subnets. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you're having trouble with the tunnel coming up, try to configure all of the subnets that are enabled on the Meraki side. Going back to the FortiGate, under the advanced section, we do need to edit this just a little bit here from the default values. Marcellus, what were the phase 2? I forget.
Yeah, so for the phase 2 encryption, we had AES 256, AES 192, AES 128, and 3 DES as our options. And then for our authentication, well, let me know when you're ready.
What was the...
So AES 256, AES 128, AES 192, and 3 DES.
So it's not
for the encryption, and then for the authentication, we had SHA-1 and MD5.
Is this for phase 2?
Yes, for phase 2.
Can we make a change there, because it's not giving me any of those options?
So for the all right, so for the phase 2 over there, I see you have the 128. I see you have the AES 256. Good. All right, and then so I can take off.
I think we were doing, I just double checked. We were doing AES 256 with SHA-1 before.
Okay.
Do we have that?
Yeah, I can swap it out.
Okay.
Technically, if I remember correctly, it's as long as you have matches within for that phase 2, it'll select the best. But just for the simplicity of it, we can go ahead and remove the different options. So for right now, for AES 256 is the only one for encryption, and SHA-1 is the only one for authentication. PFS group is turned off, and then our lifetime is going to be the 28,800 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, you can have multiple values configured here, and as long as one of the configured values matches up, the IPSec SAs will form. For the purposes of our video, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible, so we're just using one configuration for phase 1 and phase 2.
Which is also a very helpful tip if you're troubleshooting as well. So
yeah,
always keep it as simple as possible when you have that option.
Yeah. The perfect forward secrecy is disabled on the MX side, so we are going to go ahead and disable it from over here. From these default options, you can leave these selected as all, and then I have auto negotiate selected. That will make sure that the FortiGate does act as an initiator and try to form the tunnel. Last thing that we need to change is the key lifetime, which again was the same as phase 1, 28,800 seconds. And from there, we should be able to go ahead and save this. So here's our tunnel here. One thing to note, when you do configure a custom tunnel in the IPsec wizard, you do need to make some additional configurations on the FortiGate side. You do need to add firewall policy rules for the tunnel, and then you also do need to add routes for the IPsec tunnel. If you are able to use the wizard and use one of these default configurations that we have here, it will auto create those for you. But since we have to use custom, we'll need to do that. So also a good something to learn here, which we do run into a lot of customers asking how you configure VPN rules for tunnels, because the MX side, like, you can only do inbound rules. So or I believe it's outbound rules that you can configure on the Meraki side.
Yeah, you can get inbound rules.
Yeah.
You do have to reach out to their customer support to have them enable that for you.
So yeah, on the MX side, it's going to be just outbound firewall rules. So the FortiGate side, we can do inbound and outbound. Just one difference between the FortiGate, a little plug for the FortiGate there. So let's move over to firewall policy, and we'll go ahead and create new. So we'll give it a name. We'll give it the name gate2mx. And then for the incoming interface, we are going to select the interface for, this is my this will be whatever interface that your subnet is attached to that we're advertising. So we're using the user subnet here. Our outgoing interface is going to be the interface for the IPsec tunnel, which is also called gate2mx. And then for the purposes of this video, we're keeping this as simple as possible. So for source and destination, I'm just going to select all. But it is advised that you would only allow whatever subnets or certain IP addresses that you actually want to be able to communicate over this tunnel. But again, for simplicity, we're just going to select all here. And then service, we're just going to select all as well. Typically for an IPsec tunnel, we really don't want to be natting traffic going over the tunnel. So we're going to go ahead and disable that function here. And then we're leaving all the security groups off. So we're not doing any type of packet inspection over here, again, just for simplicity, but it would be advised to be doing some type of traffic inspection over this tunnel. So you can configure your different profiles here, but we're going to leave these blank for now. So we're going to go ahead and enable this policy, and then we need to create a second policy, just doing the reverse of the first one. So we're allowing traffic here from the FortiGate side to go to the MX. We now need to configure it for the MX side to go to the FortiGate side. Again, disable NAT for this. And click OK. So our firewall policy rules are now configured. So that's how you would configure firewall rules for IPsec tunnels. It's very easy. You're basically just selecting those tunnel interfaces, and that's all you really need to do to configure firewall rules for an IPsec tunnel. Next thing that we're going to need to do is come under network and then static routes. We are going to add a static route to point traffic going to Marcellus's subnet over the IPsec tunnel. Once we select the interface, the gateway address will go away. It's just going to use the tunnel. So let's go ahead and select that. Advanced options, we can just keep that the same. So go ahead and click OK. And now we have our static route configured. So from here, one other thing to note, the MX devices, as of 15 firmware, that I know of, it might still be the same. I'm not sure up to this point. I believe they're on 18 firmware. But since I left Meraki, the MX devices do not act as an initiator for IPsec tunnels. They're just in passive mode, so they'll be listening for the IPsec tunnel. But we want to have both sides just act as an initiator here. So what you can do is from the Meraki dashboard, from the MX page, if we just come under here and just try to initiate what is called interesting traffic, so traffic that would be routed over the IPsec tunnel, we generate that traffic and then it will try to form that tunnel. So let's go ahead and just restart these pings here. And now if we go under login report and then system events, and we go under VPN events, this is where we're going to be checking the logs to check on the status of our tunnel. So if you do have a FortiAnalyzer, just change it to memory so we're getting the most up-to-date logs here. And it does look like we are running into some phase 1 issues here. So this is really useful for troubleshooting.
And let me look. I think I actually see that issue where I believe when I put the private subnet for your side, I put the wrong subnet in. Let me make that change right now. So I actually put your private subnet as the 91.0, so the actual subnet versus like the specific what you're looking for. Sorry.
Yeah, so it should be 192.168.91.0/24. That's what I'm advertising to the MX.
Yeah, I just changed that, and then we can double check. I'll also check on the VPN status as well.
Just for some troubleshooting tips here as well, if we come under IPsec tunnel, you can monitor the status of the tunnel so we can see that it's currently down. If you do click on here and click show matching logs, it will take you directly to the log page where it will give you all logs pertaining to the progress of this tunnel. I would advise to take out this because sometimes if you don't get far enough along where it's able to even associate these negotiation attempts to a configured tunnel, if you have that filter in there, it won't show you. So I would advise to just keep this blank. And some other troubleshooting things you can do. I have a dashboard created for an IPsec monitor. So if you click the plus button, you can just add a specific IPsec monitor, which gives you information pertaining to your IPsec tunnels. From this monitor, you can see how much traffic is going over that tunnel. You can see what phase 2 selectors are up or down, and then you can bring tunnels up or down directly from here as well. So another good troubleshooting tip. So let's just go ahead and go back through our configurations and make sure that we have everything set up correctly here. This shouldn't matter, but when we did have this up before, I was using IP range, so I'm gonna change that to IP range. It shouldn't matter, but I'm gonna go ahead and configure that anyways. Yeah, this shouldn't matter because we're failing at phase 1 and this is phase 2 anyways, but I just do want to match these up. Marcellus, can you confirm the phase 1 selectors?
Yes, so for encryption, we have AES 256. For authentication, we have SHA-256, and our Diffie-Hellman group is 14.
And then we have 28,800 seconds.
Yes.
Okay. Can you just double check that the password is Fortinet 123?
Yeah, I'm checking right now. Well, actually, it won't let me see what the password is, so I'll just re-put it in Fortinet 123, and I'll click save.
Just a general troubleshooting tip here as well. When you are going through and troubleshooting something like this, it's advised that you make one change at a time and then test again instead of making multiple changes and then testing. Just something you learn along the way, so you can identify like what in particular was the issue there. Because if you change multiple things and then it comes up, you can't really identify which one of those things was the issue. So just make one change at a time here and then test again. So we did make a change there. So let's just come back and see where we are. I'm gonna go ahead and reinitiate these pings from the MX. So if we double click on this log here, it will give us some information here. So it moved to port 4500. So IPsec tunnels will start on UDP port 500. And then once they determine that they're behind a NAT, it would automatically move to port 4500. So we know that we're at least detecting that there is a NAT present, and we're moving to 4500. Another troubleshooting tip on the Meraki side of things, if you come under network wide and then packet capture, we can take some packet captures on the Meraki side of things. So you would just come to network wide packet capture on the interface. You would keep it as internet, download as a .pcap. It's just easier to use filters and such if we do it as a download and then open it directly in Wireshark. You can generally leave these blank, or you can put in like the host name, which would be my public IP address coming from my FortiGate. But we'll go ahead and just leave that blank. Marcellus, if you don't mind taking a packet capture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can also check some logs on the Meraki side as well. If you come under network wide event log, and then under the event, make sure it's set to security appliance, and then just type in VPN, and we'll be doing all non Meraki VPN, and then just make sure your time is set correctly. Meraki logs not throwing any Meraki logs are not the best. I think it's well known throughout the industry. Meraki logs aren't necessarily the most reliable. So in terms of logging, I'll be leaning more so on the FortiGate side of things here. Let's go ahead and refresh this, see if we made any progress here. Still looks like we're failing at phase 1. Let's go ahead and adjust those remote ID values, because that's going to be negotiated at phase 1. Let's see here. I'm going to remove it from my side where I configured it. We'll leave it on the Meraki side for now. We'll go ahead and restart pings and see where we're at. And Marcellus, do you remember if we had the remote ID configured on the Meraki side when we had the?
We did. We
Yeah.
did. Yeah. I want to say that was what got us past the hash, because that was we were having issues with the hash and we had to add that remote ID. Yeah. Now the only change we've made is for phase 2, which shouldn't have any impact on what we're seeing through phase 1.
Okay, so we did get past phase 2. So the 192.168.230.6, that is already the IP address that's configured on my MX. So there's really no need to configure a local ID as long as you have that configured on the Meraki side of things. When we did have this up before, I did not have that configured. So it's sort of like a duplicate configuration, if you will. So I did remove that. We are past phase 1 now. It looks like we are failing on phase 2. So let's go ahead and start double checking configurations from phase 2. And let's see if these logs give us any indications here.
It's like there was a negotiation error. Now on phase 2 of the Meraki, we have AES 256 and SHA-1 with PFS group turned off. Lifetime is at 28,800 seconds. Prior, when we had it up before on phase 2, I had all of the default options open. So AES 256, 192, and 128, as well as 3 DES. And then authentication is showing options for SHA-256 and for MD5 as well. But for right now, we just have it AES 256 for encryption on phase 2 and SHA-1 for the authentication. Do we want to check, change the IPs back to the IP subnets? Because for the private subnet, we're expecting on the
Looks like
Meraki side is for the whole subnet, not for a range.
it looks like the tunnel's up on my side, actually.
Did it come
Sometimes
up?
they
Let me
do
double
like
check.
kind of take a second after you make some configuration changes. Definitely give it
Yeah.
some time, but it does look like this tunnel is up. You can see from the IPsec monitor here that it is turned to green, and we can see some traffic going over the tunnel. If we come back down to VPN, IPsec tunnel, it does show as green. On the Meraki side,
Yeah, it's showing is up on the Meraki side as well. And I'm
you
also
wanna just share your screen really quickly and show
Yeah,
where you're seeing
absolutely.
it there.
All right, absolutely. So for the Meraki side, a couple things we can check. You can go to your appliance status page and you can actually ping an inside IP address, which we've done. So we do see traffic is passing through.
That's
In
gonna
the,
be the IP address, the local IP on my FortiGate. So that is
yeah,
my user interface IP address. So that's the LAN side IP of my FortiGate.
yeah, and it could also be really any internal which is within that internal subnet hosted on Alex's side. So yes, in this case, we are hitting the internal interface of the FortiGate. We are getting response traffic. Another option to verify connectivity is we can actually go to the VPN status page. And when we go to our Non Meraki, we can see that we do have a connected status there as well.
Awesome. Thank you for showing that. The based on our experience, I would say the most reliable thing to test to see if a tunnel is up or not is just to do a direct ping to an IP address that lives across the tunnel. That's the most reliable way to tell if the tunnel's up or down, rather than just seeing if it's green or not. I do know, I'm not sure. It's been about 1.5 years since I was at Meraki, but one of the things in the Meraki dashboard is that green icon for non-Meraki peers. It would turn green if phase 1 was up.
Yeah. It
So
is that green status is for phase 1 only, so it can be tricky. It can technically have a green status and not be working on phase 2.
yeah, so it'll show you green. You think the tunnel's up and good, but really that's only phase 1 is up, and phase 2 it's failing at phase 2. So this can be a little bit misleading. So best practice, I would say, is to just try pinging an IP address that actually lives across that tunnel. From there, so we basically showed you some basic troubleshooting steps. Try pinging across the tunnel. Within the Meraki dashboard, you can go network wide packet capture. Within Wireshark, if you open up a capture, so I'll just do one really quickly here and just show you what you can do within Wireshark. So we're going to do for appliance. I'll take this really quickly here. While that's going, so you have that PCAP going here. And then if you go to network wide event log, and then search in your event log on the Meraki side for all non-Meraki client VPN, that should show you some logs for your non-Meraki peers. From the FortiGate side of things, it's really useful to use the IPSec monitor and just use the green arrow, see if it's up or down. Also using the clicking it, showing show match logs. This will show you all logs pertaining to this tunnel. Like I said before, I generally keep this with no filters on it. You can also take packet captures from the FortiGate side of things. If we come under network, I believe, and come under diagnostics, we can take packet captures from the FortiGate side of things. Just select WAN 1, and then you can set a packet capture filter or filters for the capture in general.
And just as a general rule of thumb in terms of troubleshooting, I typically do recommend not utilizing filters when you're initially starting with packet captures, because you don't want to accidentally miss relevant traffic. Rather, take the capture, then utilize filters to break it down, and then moving forward, then you can start using filters once you verified from the initial captures that you've at least captured the relevant traffic, and then you can pre-filter as well. There are concerns with captures. That's why you don't run too long, take up too many resources, but especially if we're looking at like a minute or so, we're going to delete them afterwards, then yeah, I typically recommend leaving the filters off, filter the full capture, and then if necessary, take additional captures pre-filtered if you're looking to capture a lot of traffic and you specifically know what you're looking for.
That's a great point. And we did do this in our tech days as well. Definitely advise that. One filter that you can use in that packet capture from the Meraki side is just filtering this for traffic coming from my FortiGate's public IP address. So that would be ip.addr equals, and then my, actually, this should be my public IP, which you can get from the dashboard, and then status, and then you should see WAN IP right here. Let's go ahead and enter that in. So here you can, this is filtering traffic for just my IP address. So you can start from there, see if you're actually getting traffic from that IP address or not. Another filter you can use is filtering it for the port numbers that IPsec tunnels use. If they're not going any type of a NAT traversal, it'll be using port 500. If you're going over a NAT device, it would enable NAT T, and then it would switch over to port 4500. So you can see that you could filter it by port number as well. So it's just some good troubleshooting tips there.
And one more, not to interrupt you, that's also very helpful if you're specifically talking about VPNs. You can filter by IKEv1 or ESP as well if you just want to see specifically the negotiation of the VPN, which would be held under IKEv1. And then if you're seeing ESP traffic, that means that that is encapsulated. So that's that encapsulated security payload. So that's also an additional if you want to specifically for troubleshooting VPN as well.
Yes, thank you. So I just sort of want to wrap up again what we did here, go through the configurations that we used, everything from the Meraki side and the FortiGate side, just go through that very quickly. And just to highlight that these configurations are not going to be guaranteed for every scenario. You might not be behind a NAT device. One side might be behind a NAT and the other is not. In this particular scenario, both of these MX and FortiGate devices are both behind NAT devices. So if you do run into this scenario and these match up, using our configurations and copying this should work for you. But I just want to highlight that these configurations might not work for every scenario. Every scenario might be different. And this was for IKEv1. In general, it's advised to use IKEv2. It is a lot more secure and simpler in the way that it negotiates tunnels. So it is advised to use IKEv2, but it is still pretty common for businesses to use IKEv1. So that's what we did for this video. So to just sort of wrap things up here, I just want to go back through again and show you the configurations that we use for this tunnel. Marcellus, if you don't mind just going through the Meraki side very quickly again and show us what configurations that are used, and I'll switch back over here.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the Meraki side, let's bring it up. So from the site-to-site VPN page, we did turn this on as a hub. From my previous time working at Meraki, if I remember correctly, if you're doing a non-Meraki device to a Meraki device for VPN, you'll need to have it as a hub on the Meraki side. You can't connect it as a spoke to a non-Meraki hub. So we did select that as a hub. We did make sure that we have at least one subnet being enabled to communicate or advertise over that VPN tunnel. We've gone ahead and we selected IKE version 1 for our tunnel type. For our configurations for phase 1, we're utilizing AES 256 with SHA-256 as our authentication, Diffie-Hellman Group 14 and 28,800 second lifetime. Phase 2, we're using AES 256 for encryption, and SHA-1 is our authentication with PFS group turned to off and also having a 28,800 second lifetime. Local ID is off by default for IKE version 1. Can't configure that. Remote ID, this is going to be the local ID of your remote peer. Typically, you'll see that as an internal interface. Some vendors do let you configure that for email address or another value. So you do want to make sure that you know what it is set up for on that remote device and put that there. We're then including what private subnets we expect to be advertised from that remote peer, our pre-shared secret, and which networks we want this VPN to be available on. In this case, we've selected for all networks. Just to confirm, when I say all networks, I am talking about all Meraki networks. So if you have multiple Meraki sites and you only want certain sites or certain networks to be able to utilize this VPN, since VPN is an organization-wide setting, here's where you would set that up. Pretty clear and to the point. So on the Meraki side, that's really about all you need.
Awesome, thank you. And then if you did want to set up firewall rules, it's right underneath that GUI interface. It says outbound firewall rules, so you can configure those if you wanted to on the Meraki side. So I'll go ahead and quickly go through the FortiGate side. So under VPN and then IPsec tunnels, this is the one that we're working with. So in the IPsec wizard, you will need to select custom. We are doing it by static IP address. You could be doing it by FQDN, but it's typically going to be a static IP address. Enter in the remote public IP, and then what interface of the FortiGate that we should be reaching out to on the interfaces. The only default value that we did need to change from here is going to be the DPD or dead peer detection. This isn't something that's typically negotiated in any of the phases. It's not part of like the negotiations where it would prevent a tunnel from coming up or not. I just know that in my experience with TAC, there were some times where it did cause issues with tunnels coming up. So that's one thing that I did change that enabled this tunnel to come up is disabling dead peer detection. So just go ahead and disable that. And then coming down to authentication, pre-shared key, enter in the pre-shared key value, IKE version 1, using main mode. Aggressive mode is not even supported on the Meraki side, so just main mode. Aggressive mode is only used for client VPN. If you're connecting from one of the native with like Windows for just client VPN stuff. So, but for IPsec tunnels, for site to site, just main mode. Coming down to phase 1 proposal, we kept this simple and just used the singular values. You can have multiple values configured here, and as long as one of them match up, the tunnel should form. But to make things easier, we're just using one value, and it was AES 256 with SHA 256. Diffie Hellman group 14, key lifetime 28,800 seconds. Leave the local ID blank on this side. The value on my WAN IP is 192.168.230.6. So that already matches up to what we configured on the Meraki side. XAuth is not something that we need to configure here. And then our phase 2 selectors. Just select the remote IP address or the local IP address that we're going to be advertising to the Meraki side, and then the subnet that is being advertised to us from the Meraki side. Again, if you have multiple values enabled on the Meraki side, you might need to add all of those IP addresses in here. Whether you're actually going to use them over the tunnel or not, just something to be aware of. I wouldn't configure those all by default, just if you're running into any issues, just something to troubleshoot with. And then we used IP range here on my side and just entered in the ranges that we're advertising and receiving. And then under the advanced for phase 2, we used AES 256 for encryption, SHA-1 for authentication, turn off PFS or perfect forward secrecy, and then enable auto negotiates and change the lifetime seconds to match up, which is 28,800 seconds. And that is actually the other two things that you're going to need to configure using custom were the firewall rule policies. Again, you just come to firewall rule policy, click create new, and then use the interfaces for the tunnel and then the internal interfaces that are going to be communicating over this tunnel. So gate to MX, and then my user interface, which you can see is that 192.168.91 IP range. And then you'll need to make a vice versa rule. So 2 firewall rule policies in here, and then just adding the routes for the tunnel under static routes. So 192.168.5.0, and the interface going over that tunnel. So that is going to do it for this. I hope this was helpful for everybody. We do run into this a lot, so I did want to create this video to just try to help everybody out there. Want to thank Marcellus for hopping on with me.
Oh
Thank you,
man,
Marcellus.
thanks for the invite. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is good. Did require a lot of troubleshooting, but I'm glad that we were able to run into some of those issues too. So you got to see our live troubleshooting as well. So we went through, we configured an IKEv1 IPSec tunnel between FortiGate and an MX device. Show you how to configure firewall rules for communication over an IPSec tunnel and adding static routes for that. And with that, that is going to wrap up the video. Like always, if you do need any help, shoot a like in for the video, comment. I'm glad to help if you do run into any issues, and smash that subscribe button. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Have a great one.